Hey, this is Rob Gallup here, and we are working with MapTool, and we're going to take a closer look at placing, sizing, and orienting creature tokens and objects on the map. We're going to start with working in the token layer. We've covered, just touched on it briefly, how when you put a creature token on the map, it asks you for NPC or PC. You're always going to want to go with the default of NPC unless it's a PC. You don't have to put only creature tokens in the token layer. You can put other objects in the token layer as well. But the reason why this matters is when you are working with vision and light, every token has this edit setting where under the config tab, you determine what type of sight the token has. And it's almost always going to be normal vision or dark vision. And the reason why this option here, PC, NPC, matters is how this token can see the map or see light affects the way the map image is rendered later on when you start using those settings. It's not important to understand the details right now, but conceptually, just understanding that for everything else, it's NPC, and for PCs, you're always going to want to use the PC setting when you are asked. So I'm going to cancel that for now. First thing we're going to look at is snap to grid versus smooth movement. You notice that when I click and hold this creature token and I start to move it, it's doing a couple things for me. It's measuring how many feet in squares that I'm moving it. You can see 5, 15, 20, 25, 30. And it's showing the line of where it moves. So besides that useful utility, you can also see how it is snapping from the center of one square to the next as I move it. And when I release it, it is always centered in one square. And by default, things that you put in the token layer will do that. In the object layer, see how this boat isn't snapping around. It's moving very smoothly, so you can position it much more finely. Objects generally don't have to be tied to one particular square or group of squares. And this setting, in every layer, it's the same. It works the same way. Snap to grid. So when snap to grid is enabled, this will snap along the borders of the image from one square to the next. The tokens have the setting as well. Right click, snap to grid or not, and now I can move this precisely without it snapping to the grid. But nearly always with creature tokens, you're going to want it to snap to grid, and with everything else, you probably will not want it to snap to grid. Orienting images. Every image can be set to face basically north, south, east, west. There is no, like right now, we'll consider this to be facing west, this boat. It could, the boat could face in one of 4 different directions. And we set that by right-clicking and set facing. And as I move the pointer around the boat, I can face it south, west, north, east. And when it's where I want it to be, I just tap or click anywhere on the map, and now it's pointing in that direction. That's the way things work in the object layer. In the token layer, facing works a little bit differently. There is a rule, an option in 5th edition D&D and in a couple of other RPGs where the way a creature is facing determines what it can see and what it can attack and bonuses to hit or bonuses to be hit and whatnot. And that's called facing as well. With a token, when you use the set facing option, you see this little arrow that appears, and you can just point again north, south, east, west. It can't point up here to northeast. It's always going to be in one of those 4 directions. I've never seen anyone actually use this in 5th edition, so you probably won't either. But if you want to know, that's what it does. So I'm going to hit clear facing, and we'll go back to the view where you don't see facing. With tokens, and with all objects, but it's most useful with tokens, you've got this option here where you right-click, and there's flip. And you can basically mirror the image. You see the way it's facing over here now. It's gazing, the undead here is gazing off to the east. If I hit flip horizontal, it will flip it over and mirror like, and now it's facing in the opposite direction to the west. I could flip it vertically, but now it's just upside down and kind of looks weird, so probably won't use that much. The flip isometric plane is a little trickier. It's not really a useful setting. I'm not even sure why it's in there, but just in case you saw it, you were curious, that's what it does. Okay. Sizing. When the token layer is selected and you drop an object onto the map, by default, besides asking you if it's an NPC or PC, it will always make it take up 1 square, which is in creature sizes. There's small creatures, medium creatures, large creatures, huge creatures, lots of different sizes of creatures. The default is it assumes that anything you're putting in the token layer is a creature token and it is a medium-sized creature. You can change that by right-clicking and hitting size. Medium makes it take up exactly 1 square. Large, for example, will make it take up the space of 4 squares. And so on with huge, getting up, we're up to 9 squares. What's different is when you drag an object into an image into the object layer, by default, it makes the object whatever native size it is as an image file. Like this file here, table 23, is this great big honking image relative to these other images that are smaller, by pixel size, by dimensions. And so you can see by right-clicking on it by size, the default in the object layer, when you drop an object here, is free size. It's going to appear at the actual size of the image and dimensions. This can be confusing or frustrating sometimes because once you have hundreds of images over here in your library, it's not always going to be clear what size something might appear at on the map. Some things will be tiny, some things will be gigantic. A good way to get around that problem is to always start in the token layer. Whatever you drop on the map, it's going to take up exactly 1 square, and you can move it. Once it's here, you can move it to a different layer object, and it will retain those size settings. Now it's in the object layer, it's still small, and you can use these size settings to get it to be the size that you want, because most of the time the size for an object is going to be something relatively small. There's not going to be a lot of gigantic images that are going to wind up in the object layer that you're going to want to have really, really big. So just briefly, this is a good way to change the size, is to not use that free size setting that it has natively when you drop it onto the map. You can free size it just by clicking and holding on this sizing tool down here and changing size that way. But it's often a lot easier just to drop it in the token layer and use size like this, but question of individual preference. I think that covers everything. Oh, one more quick thing, selecting objects. You can see when I click on one thing in the object layer, it will select it. You can also hold down the left mouse button and you can draw this selecting area tool here. And when you release the button, the mouse button, it will select multiple things, and you can affect multiple things. With multiple things selected, you can right click on any one of them and change all of their properties at the same time. Like for instance, size, we'll change them all to medium size, and now they're all taking up exactly one square. We can flip them all, and so on and so forth. Okay, and that covers everything in this lesson, and we will be back with the next one. Thanks for watching.